Christine Sullivan fought her attacker so hard that the stone in her ring broke off. When you look at this exhibit, you're going to see that the stone in this section of the ring is out. The forensic state police lab, the analysts that worked in the lab, thought carefully about how to extract male DNA from that ring because there was evidence of defensive injuries on Christine Sullivan. They selected a lab that specialized in extracting male DNA. The DNA expert analysts who talked about carefully swabbing the outside of the ring. So she swabbed the area on the outside to avoid wearer DNA. And then she testified clearly. Tim Verrill is excluded. Not inconclusive, not open-ended, but rather not possible. It was not Tim. Tim did not murder Jenna Pellegrini, and he did not kill his friend, Christine Sullivan. He did not falsify evidence by wrapping them up in tarps and placing their bodies outside, and he did not leave fingerprints behind while handling the trash or picking up a bottle of ice melt in course of that murder. Tim Verrill is not guilty of all the charges against him. But because the investigation made the premature conclusion that it was Tim, the investigation ignored evidence that didn't fit what they prematurely decided. Ignored DNA that didn't fit, ignored paint that didn't fit, ignored the video of what happened at the bank, which showed them that they couldn't trust Josh because it didn't fit. The investigation at all levels in this case ignored the glaring defects of their witnesses' credibility. They ignored evidence that pointed away from Tim. They ignored the rational conclusions consistent with Tim's innocence that emerged from a fair and objective view of all of the evidence. The prosecutor told you in the beginning that the reason the murderer killed was to protect himself, protect the business, protect his boss. The reasons for the killings might be true, but the murderer was not Tim. Tim did not need to be in control and the center of attention. Tim was pulling out of the business, not building one up. Tim did not try to impress his boss, never mind, protect him. I'm going to talk to you about why Tim doesn't fit the state's profile and who did. I'm going to talk to you about the drug business and why Tim doesn't fit in and who did. And then I'm going to talk about the boss and why Tim didn't impress him and did not do his bidding and who did. After I talk about why Josh should have been the major line of investigation and how he wasn't. We're not saying that Josh committed the murders. Neither his nor anyone else but Tim's DNA was compared to the evidence. We're not saying that Josh ordered the murders. Neither his phone nor his home were searched for evidence. Whether him or not, Josh was protecting the murderer, and we know that Tim was not the murderer because Josh did not protect him. With this different frame of reference, I'm going to go through the state's case and show how they got it wrong. Tim is not about himself, he's not about the drug business, and he did not cover for Dean. Let's look at who Tim is that we learned from the testimony of the witnesses. He's an artist. He painted for festivals. He built rock sculptures. He was a calm person. He enjoyed the company of women. Kathy Bradstreet enjoyed him. Vanessa Mango said, "Hi, I like Timmy. I want to talk to him." And Christine. Tim never made Kathy feel uncomfortable. That's why she didn't turn down the chance to play the VR with Tim at Tim's place for 2 hours sometimes during the month of January. Tim's not a member of the club. He doesn't go around saying love and respect. He doesn't live by the code. He was a drug user that made it known to his friends that he wanted to stop. In January, he hung out less with his drug dealer friends, and that's why Dean and Josh kept stalking him. He was actually pretty self-aware. He actually verbalized his concerns. "I don't feel good. I need to turn my life around." Unlike Josh's vague description of Tim was confused, Tim was able to articulate to others what was going on. He knew he needed to sleep. He hung out with his dad. He needed to stop using and change his life. Let's compare Tim with someone who is about himself. Josh, Sergeant of Arms. He was in the top 3 in the motorcycle club, Mountain Men Motorcycle Club. He was a debt collector. When he has to, he can act aggressive. That's what he told you. He knows how to change his persona. He likes to hold court. He took over his girlfriend's house and had people over all the time. And he sent the owner of the house out of the room during some of those meetings. Josh didn't trust women. He assumed women were snitches. He ordered them out of the room. And by the way, when he said he told you he hugged Christine outside of the bank, the video from the bank will show you that he did not. Christine hugged Tim. Josh was also a drug user, and he was a drug user that was paranoid. Attorney McNichol reviewed with him the story about him calling the police or telling the police that he was sure somebody was following him in a pickup truck. And Josh was dramatic, not calm. According to Cassie, his girlfriend, he was always so dramatic. Out of these two, if anyone was protecting himself, it was Josh. When we look at Tim, the drug dealer, what do we see? He's been doing it for a few years, but lately just not into it. He was late on payments, missing appointments. He was getting out of the business. And not only was he getting out of the business, Josh and Dean were cutting him out of the business. He was not a Dean or Christine replacement. He only provided when both of them were not there, and that was rare. Clough hardly knew Tim, and Clough was up there regularly visiting Christine as a friend as well as a dealer. So that when you review these texts, and you're going to get all of them, review them with a different perspective. The perspective of who Tim is. He's not somebody that disrespects women. Josh says, he's talking to Josh, and on January 26, 2017, and he wants to know how to do something to get that calendar thing together. And Tim says, I don't know what Dean wants to do, but Chris is up there, and she knows more than me right now. Think about who Tim is when you read these messages. There's no underlying tone of resentment when Tim talks about Christine or refers to Christine. Compare with someone who did care about his drug dealing business. Josh was up and coming in the past months. He was developing liaisons between people. He set up calendars, cared about the details of the business, stepping up to take over Tim's buyers. No remorse about being a dealer, by the way. When Attorney McNichol just commented on the fact he spent just one day in jail, Josh said, less than one day. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to serve any jail time. If anyone had a business to protect, it was Josh. Tim was not about protecting Dean. He may have been close to Dean. He may have known Dean for a while, but he was friends with everybody. He was friends with Christine. He was friends with Kathy. He helped Christine with her various projects. Compare that with Josh and his relationship with Dean. Love and respect. Got a new business going. Dean's hanging out in the clubhouse, trying to impress Dean. He coordinates getting the money to the bank. He's developing a cocaine sale business and keeping out Christine, keeping out Tim. It's all about those two, new budding relationship. It's going to be a great year because of this business. If anyone needed to protect the boss, to protect his livelihood, it was Josh. So the police and the AGs never looked at Josh and should have. And what do I mean by that? Well, never searched his home. They searched Stephen Clough's home, though. Never took search of his body. Never took his DNA. They took Stephen Clough's DNA. Never searched for drugs. They searched Stephen Clough's for drugs. Never searched his phone. Didn't confiscate his phone. The only records we have is a period of time from Verizon. They took phones from Stephen Clough, from Dean Smor. Josh lies. It doesn't matter whether they're intentional or non-intentional, he lies. In one trial, he said, nope, I'm not a debt collector. I've never had that role. In the next trial, yeah, I was Dean's debt collector. Did it 10 to 15 times. He liked to do omission of the facts, like taking drugs out of Dean's house. Never told that to the police initially, because he cared more about his business and about his boss than he did about the truth and the investigation of the homicides. He left out the fact that he went to the house at 4 a.m. to collect a camera. Again, concerned with himself, concerned about his boss, but not about the truth in the investigations. And then look at this. You're going to, by the way, Exhibit AA. This is the bank video. You are going to be able to review the bank video again and compare it against his testimony. Because his testimony said he told you that he hopped out of the car, barely got into the car, when he saw that it was Jenna in the Volvo. When you watch the video, he didn't hop out. He was in there for a good 30 seconds or more. He told you that Tim stayed in his car, and Josh himself waited outside the car. Tim and Josh waited outside the car together for 4 to 5 minutes waiting for Christine. Then, as already mentioned before, Christine hugged Tim, not Josh. Who is Ian Bates? He's the guy that Josh was with, supposedly, when he went out to go to Home Depot. The police never verified that. He went out to Home Depot. There's no Home Depot receipt. There's no video. That would have given him a time that maybe Tim was up by Meterborough Road, maybe past Josh. Without any vetting, the state gave him immunity. The state will suggest that giving him immunity maybe makes him more reliable. But as you saw, with all the protection of the state, Josh was still concerned with his image, as evidenced by his consultation with his attorney in the middle of the trial. The grant of immunity and a lack of any investigation into Josh's whereabouts at the time of the murders diminishes Josh's credibility to such an extent that it puts into question many key elements of the state's theory. We know nothing about Josh's whereabouts on Friday, the 27th, after he talked to Dean. I can tell you one thing, he didn't call Christine. Now I'm going to review how the state's investigators' failure to keep an open mind, preventing them from seeing that Tim did not commit the murders. In the opening, the state described the murder scene as disorganized steps to hide what he had done. It's really about the disorganized steps in the police investigation which led to the arrest of an innocent man after thousands of photos, over 500 pieces of evidence, and hundreds of interviews in multiple states. This disorganization starts with A, the state's unquestioning acceptance of Josh Colwell's misdirection, which leads to B, the misinterpretation of the surveillance video, the chats, and the location maps, and the crime scene. Finally, it resulted in glossing over or ignoring evidence which suggests that Tim is innocent and inserts reasonable doubt in every stage of this case. I'm going to pause for a moment and talk about state's use of rumors, speculations, in reference to the defense. We did not put on any rumor or speculation as part of our defense. The defense has been a rigorous challenge to the evidence the state claims points to Tim, as well as trying to show you evidence that the state left out or failed to present to you that was consistent with someone else and not Tim committing the murders. The unquestioning acceptance of misdirection started with Josh Colwell. The investigation started looking at anyone and everyone. You heard, everybody came to the scene early morning hours of January 29th, and they were going to search rigorously to find who or murder these women. All hands were on deck. But Josh is the one who shifted the investigation's focus so that Tim as a suspect became the focus. He introduced the claim of a change in Tim's behavior because of drugs. He's the one that said it. And he's the one who claimed that Tim was fixated on Jenna. Claimed it was because Jenna was a snitch. Well, let's look at what happens when you question how Josh told the police the subtle but intentional claims. With respect to Jenna, it was Josh who saw Jenna first. It was Josh who saw Jenna with Christine's phone. Why is that important? Well, Josh is going into business with Dean. And Dean's girlfriend, who's also at the house with all the drugs and the money, has given her phone to this other woman. Women can't be trusted. It was Josh who hung outside of the bank with Tim, waiting for Christine for 5 minutes after he met and texted Jenna. You can't tell me. But you really ask yourself, really? He didn't mention the fact that there's a stranger in Christine's car? During that whole time they were waiting for Christine to come out of the car, out of the bank? And think about how Josh was behaving when he was testifying about the bank rendezvous. He was uncomfortable in that seat as Attorney McNichol was trying to get more details out of him when he was showing the video. It was Josh who told Tim to call Dean about Jenna. It was Josh who offered phones as cameras to Tim to spy on Jenna. Josh testified that Tim was really worked up. If Tim was really worked up, why did Josh encourage Tim to get more worked up by giving him spy phones? Tim wasn't the one obsessed with Jenna, because Tim wasn't the one with the business to protect or a boss to protect. Christine was his boss and friend, and he respected her. There was no behavior on Jenna's part that you saw on the video that would have raised anyone's suspicion. Let alone Tim. When he was there, she was just doing laundry and hanging out in her room on the phone. Josh is the one who was obsessed with Jenna. He's the one who saw her first, texted with her when she had Christine's phone. He's the one who thinks women can't be trusted and sends them out of the room. Josh is the one who was worried about protecting his investment in the drug business, not Tim. So Josh also tries to subtly characterize how Tim was behaving Friday morning. He wanted to comment on, oh, his BO was really bad. Even Cassie commented on that. Well, bad BO can just be been out, staying late up the night before. They both commented on his BO, but you know what they didn't comment on? Cleaning solution. Bleach, ammonia, orange, anything that cleans. They didn't comment on that. Josh claims that Tim said that he needed to tie up loose ends. Someone else, not Tim, uses that phrase. Josh went up on the 25th to go see Dean before he took off the flight and knocked on the door. Dean's not there. Dean says, oh, come back. And Josh said, sure. And then Dean said, bro, I would really appreciate that. I'm really trying to deal with a few loose ends here. Change of pants. The story about the change of pants. They didn't even ask Josh to match. Say, you saw videos of him going to the store. Are those your pants? There's no connection. But Josh wants to say that he would give pants off his bottoms to anyone. I've heard giving your shirt off back, but off the bottom, no. And then Josh acts like it didn't raise red flags for him, so he didn't call Dean right then and there. Maybe he didn't call Dean right then and there because it never happened. Something else that Josh and Cassie did not notice. Blood. No stains. No stains on his shirt, on his feet, on the pants he took off, on his face and his hair. Nothing. So another subtle thing that Josh tried to do is say, we were so concerned for him in January that we tried to get him to the doctors. Really? Let's look at the text. I want you to review the text from the 16th, 17th, 18th, all the texts really, but I'm just selecting those for now. Just remember, he saw Kathy in the beginning of the month, and she was worried. Saw him again. He looked fine. He even spent a couple hours with him to play with his VR. Josh seems to give another story. He says that he was confused. Monday, January 16. Dean texts Tim on that night around 7 o'clock. Would it be okay for me and Josh to stop by tonight? Tuesday, January 17. Dean to Tim. Hey man. That was about 5 o'clock. And then 9:51. Was just wondering if you meant to come up here today or no, because she is out of here soon. No response. Phone call to Tim on Wednesday the 18th at 8:10 p.m. Just after the phone call, he texts Tim and says, I guess we need to discuss numbers and was hoping to keep the last thing out of it, so if payment is available on it, that would help. Look forward to talking. Doesn't sound like a lot of concern there. That was a concern about business. By the way, when you look at those texts on the 15th, 16th, compare it to the text he was sending Christine around the same time. And finally, the state's going to show you, I'm sure, the shopping videos, especially the one at Walmart. And then there's one at Lowe's. Doesn't look like somebody who's high on drugs or full of Jameson's shots. Think about whether or not the description that Josh gave is accurate. And what about Dean's misdirection? Officer Carey said that the focus was Tim as the suspect after talking to Dean on the property. Let's look at Dean's behavior on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The protection of cash, drugs, and the drug business was the only thing fueling Dean's behavior on those days. He says that he never heard of Jenna until Friday, early Friday night, when he talked to Tim. But no one answered the question on whether he checked the cameras Wednesday night, all day Thursday, when Jenna was around. Jenna had been there since Wednesday, or early morning Thursday. Remember when Steve Clough came up, bring up the dinner, move the clock, pick up some drugs? He may have known all along. No one was questioned the following. His representative to Kathy that he had a nice conversation with Christine on the early morning hours of the Friday, the 27th, and even exchange I love yous. Are we going to accept Dean's word on that? Because his first text on Friday morning, the 27th, at 10:56, was fuck. 10:56, typical bullshit situation with you. No answer on your fucking cell phone. No magic, Jack. I can't reach you. You fucking don't tell me shit. You absolutely should. Like the blind motherfucker that you are. I need help from you and I have to miss a flight because you're a fucking drug addict. Well, the state wants to say, well, that's how he talks. All right, but if that's how he talks, why is he only giving her, he calls at 10:50, calls at 10:52, and launches that first text at 10:56. Didn't give her much chance to answer that phone. Especially when she's somebody that usually doesn't respond to Dean right away. And he just talked to her the night before. Why wasn't he talking to her about, I've got to change my flight? Talk to you in the morning. Vanessa Mango was the first witness who testified. She came up to New Hampshire and stayed for about a month after the murders. She said she loved talking to Tim, and when questioned in one of her sworn testimony, she said she didn't recall a conversation between Dean and Tim on Thursday night. She also told you Dean hated strangers in his house, which kind of suggests that he checks his system all the time. That Dean was a controlling person, kind of suggests that he knows exactly what's happening all the time. And he also told you that Dean wanted Christine out of his life. When he didn't reach Christine, why didn't he just call Tim? He was the last person with her the night before. He didn't call Tim until later that night. Why does he wait for Josh's call? He really doesn't call anyone until Josh. And I say wait, because when Josh said that he wanted to talk on Confide, Dean didn't ask, what for? He asked, how bad is it? So he was expecting Josh's call. Josh testified, and you can decide whether this is believable, but he testified that he used Confide, the most encrypted or encrypted app, and worked hard to get Dean to accept it and set it up so he can talk to him. Why does he have to use that app to say, hey, did you check on Christine lately? I'm worried. What's so secretive about that? Why did Josh have to keep that a secret? Because he wasn't thinking? Do you know who called Dean and said, hey, I'm at your house, can I drop your stuff off on Friday afternoon? Jason. Do you know what Jason testified to? Dean said it was okay. Why didn't Dean ask, hey, can you check to see if Christine's there? I've been looking for her since this morning. Nope. He waits till Saturday to ask Jason to go back and be the surveillance man. "4 a.m. Saturday, Dean sends Josh to retrieve an SD card out of one of the cameras that was outside. What's that about? Josh is just saying, well, Dean told me there might be something on it. Did the police ever confiscate that camera? Did Josh turn over that camera to somebody? Well, no, because Josh is protecting himself and his business and his boss and not the truth in this investigation. The list goes on about what Dean did. He sends Josh at 4 a.m. to retrieve the SD camera, the card out of the camera. Sends Jason to walk the perimeter, but don't go in. Sends Stephen Clough up later that day and say, can you check the house? Yes, you can break in. And interesting, when you look at the camera working when Dean got back, what's really odd is Dean is bent over as if he knows he's being watched, and he's carefully checking that propane tank. You know what's sitting right nearby? All those trash bags that the state dug up and tested for fingerprints. Josh took off from the police, so he wasn't at home when the police stopped by to talk to him. The prosecutor may say, well, these questions raise speculative answers. That's telling you to ignore them. Don't. Because if you look at the questions closely, the answers do lead to answers that are consistent with innocent. Tim had nothing to do with the killings. The police's apparent blind eye towards all things bad about Josh and Dean clouds their judgment when they start looking at evidence at and around the crime scene. When Pickering and the other investigators looked at the surveillance videos within weeks after the killings, their view was skewed by Josh and Dean. So instead of seeing a guy hanging out with his friend Christine and walking around the property, they saw a guy scheming. Instead of seeing a guy who was just blocking the camera, like Christine also did, they saw a man scheming. Instead of a guy locking a door for the night, you know, when he's going to lock the door for the night, just like Jenna did, they saw a guy scheming. You were shown this perspective over and over again. Tim holding his shoes, wearing his white hat, entering into the other room, one of the last shots before the video was shut down. Instead of seeing a guy that might be just carrying his shoes as if he's going to take a nap, they saw a guy scheming. Instead of keeping an open question of why there was a hard shut-off of the surveillance video, they assumed Tim did it. But there's no evidence that Tim shut that video off, except for the fact he was walking in the right direction. Christine's house, too. She could have shut it off. She could have asked him to shut it down. We don't know how and why the video was shut off. And just think about who Tim is. Is he somebody that does stuff on his own? He follows orders. He's the guy that just helps out. Not the guy that takes his own initiative and turns things off just because. He's not his own boss. He's not a go-getter. So when you look at the surveillance, one thing you're going to have to ask, why is the police want you, the investigators want you, and apparently the prosecutor wants you to ignore. You're going to have this, by the way. You're going to have somewhere in here is a packet, and it contains the Alexa video, audios. And it's going to come up like this. It's going to come up like this, and it's tiny. My computer's tiny. But it's just a bunch of things to play. I know, it's confusing. explain. I'm going to play it. But you're going to be able to play it. I'm going to play 3 of them. But you're going to play all of them. But what I want to explain to you, it starts with 8:19:10, and it ends with 11:46:05. Doesn't make sense. You have to subtract 5. So it really starts at 3:19:10, and it ends at 6:46:05. So I'm going to play the one that starts at 8:34:26. So on here it says 11:34:26.
Alexa, play Florida by Miles.
I'm going to play the next one, which is 11:24:35.
Alexa, play Modest Mouse, Florida.
And then I'm going to play 11:34:47, which is 6:34:47, and it's the next one.
Alexa, you just played a song by Modest Mouse.
That was at 6:45 Friday morning. Which brings us to the next pieces of evidence the state reviewed through Josh's misdirection. The location maps and the shopping on Friday. The store video from Friday does not show a person suffering from being high on drugs or drinking shots of Jameson. It shows that Tim purchased the phone car at Walmart for around $50. No wonder he got on his girlfriend's plan the next day. He made a trip up to area of Meterboro, the location map, around 1:36. We don't know if he went all the way there, because remember, the location is approximate. It's not exact. It just means that he used that tower. But in any event, he's at Lowe's at 2:30, purchasing the bags of ice melt and the salt melt and ammonia. Then he goes south to the Dover area, makes a couple of stops. He purchases the ice melt around 2:30 from Lowe's. He doesn't go back there at night until nighttime, when Dean sends him to the ranch to look for Christine. He goes back. What did he do with the ice melt? Well, we heard that there was one print on the ice melt cap. It's consistent with somebody holding it and putting it down. It's interesting how Dean asked him to go up. Because what he says, and it's on January 27th, and it's about doesn't connect with Tim until 7:42. And he says, Timmy, hey man, I can't get a hold of Christine. Do you know if she's at the shop or what's going on? Give me a call when you get a chance, please. Is that tone of voice consistent with somebody that's really desperate to find out where his girlfriend is or business partner? Or that he's even concerned about Tim? They're gonna, I'm sure, say something, they being the state, say something about Tim buying a phone the next day. Goes in the Sprint store and you have, it's right on the video. He's not being secretive. He puts it right on Facebook. That's how Kathy Bradstreet found him. Next we have the state's misinterpretation of the crime scene. As Dr. Andrew pointed out, these killings involve the loss of a lot of blood. I don't want to ask you to look at the bodies again, but if you can remember, they were covered. You saw it on the bed, you saw it on the floor of the deck. You can imagine that the stab to the necks and the jugular vein caused the loss, the spraying of blood. Dr. Andrews said enormous amount of loss of blood. State says a disorganized cleanup, but really, where is the volume of cleanup materials one would expect from a cleanup of that much blood? A few paper towels would not have been enough. Christine was killed in the kitchen. That's where the blood stains were on the refrigerated door. That's where the blood stain on the ceiling was found and they collected. That's where the blood stain on the floor going into the three-season room is. The kitchen was clean. The countertops was clean. Alexa was unplugged to clean everything. Where was Jenna killed? State wants you to believe that she was asleep and not struggle. She was still dressed in the clothes. She was not dressed as if she's going to sleep. Dr. Andrews testified the absence of defensive wounds does not mean a struggle did not occur. Why do you think the state lab sent Jenna Pellegrini's fingernails down for testing? Because they assumed that there was a struggle and that there may be male DNA under her fingernails. It also makes no sense that stab wounds be on both sides of her body if she were in the bed. Where are the fingerprints on the bodies, on the tarp? Not one bloody fingerprint left anywhere. So let's talk about the blood on the hat that Tim wore, supposedly, at the time of the murders. Tim wore white hats all the time, and people knew it. It was stuffed in a bucket at the crime scene with bloody paper towels next to the bodies. And he's arrested. With what? A white hat and a seat. Didn't leave any prints anywhere with blood on it, but stuffed his own hat in a bucket next to the dead bodies. That makes no sense. Volvo keys. By the way, getting back to where Jenna was killed, this is red blood stain, NAR exhibit B8. It's in the hallway next to the bathroom, which is close to where Jenna's room was. Evidence that the struggle began there, we don't know. So I was talking to you about the Volvo keys. Do you remember Stephen Clough's testimony? At the end, I read in something. And I read in a statement that Clough said to an investigator early on, right after the investigation. Went into the room, I saw her keys, her purse, her laptop. This is Defense Exhibit G5. You're going to see her purse. You're going to see her laptop. But there are no keys. And what's interesting is when Dean made the 911 call, what did he say? Oh, her keys are there, her laptop, her purse. Where are the keys? This picture was taken right when the police got on the scene and secured it. There's a lot of mention of the blue tarp. Follow the blue tarp. It's going to take you downstairs through the basement, through the tool room, and that's where the bodies are. That's why you don't see any footprints outside. So it must have been somebody who knew the house. Well, a lot of people were at the house. That's one of the reasons why Dean was so angry. So there were strangers at the house. Steve Clough knew about that room. Kathy Bradstreet said she didn't go up to the house anymore because she wasn't comfortable with some of the people hanging out there. Buddy was up at the house. Buddy is the guy that put his hand on the shovel to pry the door open for Stephen Clough. When you look at the shovel, you're going to see blood on it. How is it that Buddy and Steve Clough didn't notice? They had their flashlights. So if it's dark, they had their flashlights. Trash bags. Think about how many trash bags are in the house. There's the 2 bags that they tested. There's another bag underneath that they didn't test. There's a bag in the tool room. The bags everywhere, half empty. It's interesting that Tim's prints were only found on those bags and on the jug. Didn't find Steve Clough's prints anywhere. They didn't find Dean Smor's prints anywhere. Josh, he was there. Why is it only one set of prints? They would say, well, you're speculating now, defense. Well, I'm not. I'm showing what the problem is with the state's case, and when you keep a narrow blinders on and not look at the problem with the state's case, which is they relied too much on Josh and Josh's version of who Tim is. In the end, we have a crime scene. No murder weapon, no DNA on the women that matches Tim. We have no prints on the tarp. We have no bloody clothing belonging to Tim. And when they say, well, he could have gotten rid of it. But Tim's clothing is generic. Did they even try looking for it? Not a single bloody print was found on the scene. Not one on the clear trash bags, not one on the black trash bag, not on any of the items in the bag. You're going to see red spots. No smudging. Only explanation is Tim's prints was there long before the murders. State can't have it both ways. A perfect cleanup in a disorganized crime scene. It is strangely, methodically disorganized. What we have in this investigation is a lack of follow-through. No matching of Josh's pants by Josh. No matching of the Volvo key found in Tim's car to the Volvo that Christine drove. Nobody testified those were hers. No matching of the green paint of the garage to the green paint in the basement. You know, scrape the paint off, matches the can sprayed. They didn't do that. Those can spray pans may have nothing to do with the paint on the garage. They may say, I'm distracting you. What about those machetes? What was the state trying to distract you about the machetes? It has nothing to do with this investigation. They came up as a result of a drug investigation at Dean Smorank's house in the summer of 2018, I believe. But the state was distracted. They were distracted by Josh's version and clearly distracted by additional investigation that was going on at the same time. There's no collection of all the cameras, no collection of, remember Jason said he had to drop off the materials he was collecting for Christine, but he also wanted to drop off a compositor? That was never collected. Items that were collected, cleaning bottles, some were tested. This is part of State's Exhibit 31. Some were tested, no prints belonging to Tim. Some weren't. You'll see bottles on the floor in the pictures presented by the state. Never collected, never tested. The rug cleaner. Why wasn't the rug cleaner tested? Why not the cleaner next, the container right next to it? This, by the way, is Alexa. That's what you're going to be listening to. Then there's the distraction of the ammonia bottle found in Tim's car. That's been open. Can't even see that's been open. So what? Did anybody smell ammonia? Then there's the evidence that's ignored or glossed over. In addition to evidence of misdirected investigation, you also heard about evidence showing that someone else, not Tim, committed these brutal acts. This is important evidence in the overall investigation, but since it was consistent with Tim's innocence, the state didn't present it to you. Because they were so set on Tim, they chose to ignore or gloss over it. The evidence includes time of death, the report that Dr. Andrew did, and he told you, he took into consideration environmental factors. when he talked about the deterioration of the body, when he estimated the time of death to be January 28th. Both of those women. What he said, when asked by the prosecutor, was he couldn't rule out the 27th. That's a huge window. Can't rule out the number of perpetrators. There's no prints anywhere. It's a solid cleanup. The only prints they're focusing on are the ones in the bags and the one on the heat bottle, heat salt. When you look at the diagrams of the stabs, and the doctor did not talk about this, but it's kind of hard to miss. When you compare the two diagrams of the stabs of the women, you're going to notice that both of them had 2 or 3 in the neck. That's passionate killing, given there are multiple stabs on the women, and a violent hitting against Christine on one side and stabbing on the other side. To just violence against women. Anger towards women, and you heard no evidence of that about Tim. Jump over to evidence that excludes Tim. So, TLE 208. We now know that this is a red blood stain that was collected from the ceiling in Christine's kitchen, roughly above the vacuum cleaner. You remember what they say, they don't test everything. They test something because it might be potential evidentiary value. And for this one, they tested because there was a potential for male DNA. Because there was evidence that Christine struggled, defensive wounds. And you know what? They were right. It was male DNA. It's not Tim's. 100% excludes him. And they never bothered testing it against any other male. And don't let the nanogram millimeter size diminish the significance of this result or any other DNA result. The analyst was confident about her analysis even with that size. And you can bet if it was an answer the state wanted to hear, asking for a result. That's how important the DNA under those nails were. They were rushed, they went to the lab, and then when the results came back, excluded Tim. You heard the forensic analyst Sears tell you, how does male DNA get under under fingernails by scratches. And then there's the ring taken right from autopsy. Kevin McMahon guided the investigators to the proper course of action to find trace male DNA. When it came back excluding Tim, did they let you know about that? Remember, the evidence technician said they do further testing if it helps the case. Testing should be done to find out what happened. And these test results tell you that Tim did not commit the murders. By ignoring the results, they are ignoring evidence of Tim's innocence. State did not submit another profile to compare against any of them, especially the one, TLE 208. They had a full profile for this one to compare it to anybody. State's not going to find another potential suspect if they don't look. And just going back to that word speculative or distraction, whatever, ignoring those evidence, saying, well, it's probably not part of the crime, that's speculation. Ignoring the machetes, that makes sense. So these testings were part of the crime scene. The ring was part of the crime scene. The blood on the ceilings, part of the crime scene. The fingernails, part of the crime scene. Do not ignore them. There's other types of evidence that I want to bring your attention to. The bank video. It's over there. The bank video clarified Josh's testimony. What's interesting is they would do things like, they took this out of State's Exhibit 31. This is one of the items that was in the trash bags. In the trash bags where they found some prints. But what's interesting, you would think a cleaner would have prints. None. The blood stain in the hallway that I showed you, not tested. Swabs taken out of Crystal and Tim's car to see if there's anything. Didn't hear anything. DNA testing on the carpet cleaner, not done. Prints on the buckets in which the hat was found, not examined. And I'm criticizing the state's investigation, but there's a reason for it. I'm not just playing partisan politics. You're going to get an instruction from the judge, an instruction just as objective and controlling as any other instruction. You can hold it against the state that they failed to honor the legal obligation to turn over evidence in a double homicide trial. We're here again because the state violated its responsibility to turn over materials. That's disorganization. And that's evidence of disorganization of an investigation. The court will talk to you about the definition of reasonable doubt. I'm going to leave you with this thought. There are many rational doubts in this case. The fact that the test the investigator chose to ignore DNA results that excluded Tim as a source of DNA, So the fact that the investigator chose to ignore that evidence of Tim innocent should give you pause. The fact that the investigators believe the suspect would leave his hat right next to the dead body should give you pause. The fact that this case is stitched together by the credibility or lack thereof of someone like Josh Colwell should give you pause. The fact that the prosecutor argues that cleanup was hastily done, but the investigators could not come up with one single print on the cleanup, never mind the trash bags. There are a lot of rational doubts that I have gone through this closing. I ask you that when you hear the state's version of an evidence, is to critically examine it. The fact that there are so many questions is a sign of reasonable doubt. State will comment on Tim's actions after the murders based on the date and time they have decided the murders happened, not on the date and time that the medical examiner believed the murders to happen. But their theory of the reason of Tim's action is based on the same speculation of their theory of when the murders happened. On Saturday, Tim gets bits of information that are seriously concerning. A call about Christine missing. You heard about it through Jeff, his brother. Jeff didn't notice anything about Tim, but a few hours later, what happens? Tim sends a text to his brother saying, "I'm freaking out." Brother's like, "I'm too far away," so Tim gets his mother to take him to the hospital. Tim didn't freak out about being discovered or caught. He behaved like he realized that he was entangled in something he did not want to be a part of. Unless the state can establish, and it cannot, that Tim committed the acts of murder, they cannot say what Tim was thinking about when he asked his mother to bring him to the hospital, what he was thinking about when he went to the hospital at Burlington's. Tim didn't kill Jenna. He didn't kill his friend Christine. He didn't murder anyone. Although Tim does not have the burden, Tim's problem, the problem we have on his behalf, is that we can't tell you who killed Christine and Jenna. We can't tell you exactly when Christine and Jenna were killed, and we can't tell you exactly why they were killed because of an investigation that focused too early on Tim. It missed and ignored and ignored or failed to collect other evidence that might have given those answers. And the reason that evidence was missed, ignored, or not collected was that Josh steered the investigation on Tim. Josh men in the business innocently in the background of the investigation, away from the focus. And Josh was effective. He liked to put on a show. Then just like that, he was putting on a show for you. The man you saw when he testified, but without anyone challenging him, until Attorney McNichol challenged him, the police never saw or ignored the show man. But you saw the show man. Because Josh was so effective in steering the investigation, the evidence that Tim didn't do the murders or commit the murders or falsify the evidence, crimes, was ignored. Was not followed up on, and may even be lost forever. Thank goodness you're here. In this court of law, he has you as his jury. Tim does not have to show who the DNA matched. Tim does not have to show who murdered his friend Christine and Jenna. And he does not have to show the communications connecting Josh to the murders or murderers. As the judge will tell you, we don't have to prove anything. We, on Tim's behalf, and Tim, could sit back and do nothing. And if the state can prove each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt, cannot prove each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find Tim not guilty. But we, on Tim's behalf, didn't sit back and do nothing. We pointed out why the evidence does not match the state's conclusions. We pointed out why the investigation never should let Josh in the driver's seat. We pointed out how evidence actually pointed to someone else or someone else, not to Tim. We can't prove anything. More importantly, the state has not proven Tim did it, and they cannot prove that Tim killed anyone because he did not, and he did not participate in any cleanup. The only just and fair verdict on all of the charges is not guilty.
All right, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I explained earlier, we'll take about a 15-minute break. Feel free to freshen up if you brought a snack.